The historian's research file was delivered to a county archive in 1975. By 1976 it had vanished without a trace, and the person who removed it was someone who should not have known it was there. The file that was removed. Part 3 of 4. Arthur Bryce's research document did not stay in private hands for long after his death. His daughter, Margaret Bryce, brought it to the attention of the Gloucestershire County Council Archive Office in 1975. She wanted it stored properly. She thought it was an important piece of local history. Margaret delivered the document to the archive in March 1975. She received a written receipt. The receipt confirmed that one document bundle, 17 pages in total, had been accepted for review. That receipt still exists and has been verified. In September 1975, Margaret contacted the archive to check on the document's status. She was told by an archivist named David Hollis that the document had been reviewed and was being processed. Margaret called again in November. Hollis told her the same thing. He used almost exactly the same words both times, which she noted in a letter she later wrote to the council. Margaret called once more in January 1976. Hollis had left his post. The archivist who answered could find no record of the document at all. Not the 17-page bundle, not any processing record, nothing. But the receipt Margaret held still had the council's stamp on it. She wrote a formal letter of complaint. The council replied in March 1976 and acknowledged that the document could not be located. They did not call it lost. They used the phrase unable to verify current location. They offered no further explanation. Margaret Bryce pursued this for 2 more years. In 1978, a council employee contacted her privately, not through any official channel, and told her that the document had been removed from the archive before it had ever been formally processed. This employee would not give their name. They told Margaret that the person who had removed it was not David Hollis. They told her it had been removed by someone from outside the council office, someone with a connection to a land ownership record tied to the eastern boundary of the old Barton Farm property. That land as of 1975 was owned by a private trust. The name of the trust does not appear in any publicly available property record from that period. What does appear? Found by a records researcher in 2019 is a boundary adjustment filed in 1912, 3 years after the Yates disappearance. That boundary adjustment moved the legal edge of the Barton Farm eastern boundary approximately 40 feet inward from the stone wall. In other words, the wall itself, and the narrow strip of ground between the wall and the old field edge, was quietly removed from the farm's recorded area and placed under a separate ownership record. The 1912 filing was signed by a solicitor whose name, and this is the detail the 2019 researcher noted as the most difficult to account for, also appeared at the bottom of the original 1893 magistrate's record covering Thomas Reeves' disappearance. The same solicitor 19 years apart, both documents. The solicitor's name was Edmund Crane. Edmund Crane died in 1931. His firm had no successors on record, but his name appears on both documents, and no one has been able to explain what interest a solicitor would have had in attending the magistrate's hearing for a missing farm worker in 1893. Or why the same man would file a quiet boundary adjustment around a strip of land where 3 people had vanished or encountered something unexplained, 3 years after the most recent disappearance. There is one more detail. When researchers examining the 1912 boundary adjustment looked at the description of the strip of land being separated from the main property, they found a clause that had no legal precedent they could identify. The clause stated that the strip of land was not to be entered, altered, or built upon, and that this condition was binding in perpetuity and not subject to review by any future owner or legal authority. It was not a conservation clause. It was not a heritage clause. It was not attached to any listed building, waterway, or protected species record. It was simply a permanent instruction, filed legally, witnessed, and signed, that no one was ever to go near that strip of ground again. The stone wall still stands. The strip of land is still privately held, no one knows who currently owns it, and no one has been able to answer the one question that sits at the center of all of this. What did Edmund Crane know about that field in 1893 that made him spend the next 19 years making sure no one could ever go back? The 2019 researcher who uncovered Edmund Crane's name on both documents submitted a public records request for any remaining Crane firm documents held in Gloucestershire. The request was acknowledged. The documents were confirmed as existing. They have not been released. That's it for part 3. Follow Untold Lores for part 4. Like and subscribe for daily stories.